Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Well Teacher Festival. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Tom Sherrington as the first speaker. He is the author of a range of books, but particularly the fantastic book that I've been kind of studying and trying to remind myself about how to approach teaching in the classroom is the fantastic Teacher Walkthroughs. In this absolutely terrific 40-minute presentation, Tom manages to kind of both excite and inspire teachers about returning to the classroom after a 5-month break. He kind of walks us through 5 of the techniques from the books. Now, those 5 techniques are really fundamentally going to make a huge difference in terms of setting tone and ensuring quality learning in classrooms at the start of the year. And I think as he mentions in the presentation, a good start to the year is really integral in terms of setting up a positive and healthy year ahead. And it's what we need to feel calm and confident. So he covers from everything from setting expectations to how to check for understanding effectively and efficiently to make sure that the learners in our room are understanding everything that we are exploring together. So this is a presentation that ultimately is a roadmap to effective teaching in the year to come. So a massive thank you to Tom for taking the time to record it, and I hope you find it as useful, as inspiring, as energizing as I did.
Hello everybody, this is my contribution to the Well Teacher Festival that Jamie Tom is running, and I hope you find this a useful introduction. And I'm going to be talking about some strategies that are part of the set of ideas I present in the Walkthroughs book that I just made with Oliver Caviglioli. And so I've selected 5 strategies from there, which hopefully will make a great start to the term. And, you know, if you do these well, will help you with your kind of well-being and so on, because you're kind of on the front foot, feeling in control, getting into the groove of teaching when we're sort of back to normal lessons for the first time after a long break. So hopefully you'll find these things useful. I'll go through them one at a time. And there's lots more information about these elsewhere, but these are the kind of the main 5 I thought I would select. So let's get started. The first one is establish your expectations. So here, this is really a whole process that every teacher needs to do at the start of a term. And I think it's really important to think hard about what your expectations are. It's kind of an easy phrase to kind of toss out and just say, I have high expectations. But what are those? And how do we make that a kind of a positive, warm experience for students to have the back to school? I think the first thing to do is to make sure that we know what it is that we're after and focus on communicating that to students so that they kind of are clear and making it feel kind of normal that these expectations are there. And it's definitely my experience that, you know, there's quite a variation sometimes, so even down a corridor of teachers teaching side by side, of the expectations that they have, you know, in the detail. And the students will be aware of that if they have different teachers. So you do have an enormous amount of control and power, if you like, to set expectations high. And if you can be a teacher who has high expectations and communicate them in a way which the students feel valued and trusted and cared for at the same time, then you're really onto a winner. So 5 steps that we set out on our walkthrough is a way to kind of really look at these things one by one. What are your expectations and what does it include? So right from the beginning, it's going to be things like how the students arrive, what they do when they come into the class, what they do with their stuff, how they ask a question, how they answer a question, how they set out their work. There's so many different things, and conflict arises when students aren't sure, and if you're sort of nagging them the whole time. if they're clear and you reinforce it clearly and firmly and they know where they stand, then the expectations become part of the general pattern of life in school, and they're not contested the whole time. And that is a positive, experience for students, knowing where they stand. But it really does mean that you need to sit down and spend some time before you go into the class working out what it is that you're going to be expecting them to do. Now, that might be part of a whole school thing. That might be part of a wider set of expectations everybody has. And hopefully that's the case, because if you sort of feel like you're fighting fires in your own little classroom, flying solo against the grain of the school, that's much more difficult. But if you're part of a system and you have expectations which are already clearly set out for the whole school, and you're just implementing them in your particular corner, in your context, that's much more straightforward. So it's important to know what is the general level of expectations, and then follow the agreed protocol so that you're not sticking out or being the one that's letting everybody else sort of away with things because you're not as strict about something as somebody else is. So really clear, make sure your expectations line up with the whole school, and then you're part of the whole culture reinforcement rather than something which is kind of breaking it down a bit. Communicating them. So how do the students know what they're supposed to do? Well, you have to be really explicit about it. Let's start off by saying, okay, guys, welcome back. Let's just make sure we know where we are. Let's get the ground rules going. So let's all remind ourselves what the expectations are and go through them, and then check that students have understood that. We'll talk about checking for understanding a bit later on, but checking the students know what you mean when you're saying, how to answer a question, or what you expect their books to look like, and so on. Just telling them isn't really enough. You need to teach it to them so that they understand it, and then check they've understood it, and maybe some rehearsal and so on. So set the expectations out, then make sure they know them, and then you're into the business of reinforcing them. But you can't really reinforce something you haven't established clearly in the first place. So then we have to reinforce them. So you've got to be clear that when you've set something out, that you then are assertive enough to insist on it. And you might think at the beginning of term, I'll just let them in gently. They've had a tough time. I'm going to go easy on them. And I think that's a wrong attitude. You're not going easy on them when you're letting them to do things you don't want them to do. But you don't have to be kind of horrible about it. You just say, guys, no, come on. This is what we remember what we agreed. What's the expectation? Right, let's do it again. Well done, that's good. You're positive, affirmative, make it feel good to be doing the right thing. But what you mustn't do is think, poor loves, I'll reinforce it later. That's a recipe for confusion, anxiety, you fighting against the class. Nice and calm, on the front foot, get the expectations embedded from the beginning in a nice, warm, positive, front foot kind of way. And then you'll find that it's easier to manage later. So take your time with that. Don't rush. Don't think, I've got to get into the curriculum. I've got to start teaching them intensively right now. If they're not ready for that, make sure they're with you, and invest time right from the beginning of term in getting that culture right. Because if you don't do it at the beginning, it's so hard to do it later. Not impossible, but it's much harder. So redirect, correct, or challenge. So this means making sure they're back on track if they go off. Remember saying not like that, but like this. Remember what the rule is. And then if it's challenging, well, you've got to say, no, guys, no. Remember and enforce that. What's the rule about this? I like you listening when I'm talking. So can we have that now, please? And take your time. And of course, then sustaining your expectations. Of course, once you've sort of got them all going, you have to be the one above everyone else who keeps the standard high. If you start sort of dropping your attention around being too bothered if the kids are late, or start setting their work out in a slightly less formal, high standards kind of way, or start calling out answers and you stop challenging them about that, then it all falls down. So this is the hard bit. The kind of the exhausting bit for you is, if you like, is to remind yourself, keep it high, keep the standard high, never let it drop. Relentless, just every day. No, come on. And if you insist on the small things all the time yourself, the students get used to that and they develop a kind of habit around it, which is then easier to enforce later. So make sure, check yourself about that. Are you starting to let things slide and then pull yourself back from doing that? Make sure you're the one that's really insistent. And it wasn't just like all lovely at the start of term and then sort of slacked off. It was like regular, sustained, always high. And that all comes from you. The teacher really has an incredible role in setting that. I see it all the time in schools, how simple it can be for a teacher to have very high expectations because they just nip things in the bud very, very early, constantly. Nice and positive, nice and assertive, affirmative. And it doesn't feel like they're nagging everyone to death. It just feels like they just mean it when they say things. And that's a kind of communicated through a firmness of voice and a kind of eye contact and lots of affirmative kind of reinforcement when it's being done well. Great, guys. Thank you. That's fantastic. This is what we wanted. And the students feel, oh, great, I'm doing it right. That's good. And they feel rewarded for that. So establishing your expectations is a whole process. And that 5-step thing, hopefully, sets it out for you. So the next I wanted to look at was this. This is one example. This is one of my favorite behavior management strategies because it's very sort of practical. And it helps you get the class together whenever you want them. So one of my recommendations is that you always have this process where you feel you can manage the class whenever you want to come from a period of maybe they're silently working, or they're talking in a pair, or doing any activity, and you want them now to be listening to you as the teacher. So this is the way to do it. Signal, pause, insist is the name of the strategy, and it's worth looking at. It's a very practical thing. So first thing is you need a signal. So this is the signal which tells the students that you're going to now need their attention. So you could have a very simple thing. I've known teachers to do a number of different things. Probably quite commonly it's something like 3, 2, 1, and listening. So the teacher will stand there saying 3, 2, 1, and listening. Thank you. And it's just the 3, 2, 1. The students hear it. Okay, that's my signal. Or it could just be a raised hand. I've seen teachers do this. Just very, very a raised hand. The students didn't pick up on it. There's a time where it filters round, and the students realise, oh, that hand's raised. It could be just really silent like that. It could be a more obvious, like a clap. And that's it. 3 claps. No voice needed for that. Just 3 claps. Everyone knows 3 claps means, right, stop what we're doing and turn and face and listen to the teacher. And the reason for that is because it should be something which you need to use a lot. So it needs to be simply understood, easy to do. I have seen some teachers have signals which are ludicrously elaborate, and are you really going to do that for the rest of your year or your career? Sort of multiple hand claps, and it all gets a bit gimmicky. And to keep it nice and simple, it could be an acronym. I know a school where they say 3, 2, 1, give me star, and star means that they have to be sitting up, tracking the speaker, paying attention, or asking questions, and ready to respond or something like that. But it's like 3, 2, 1, give me star. They all do this, and it's just whatever it is. It's just your signal. So choose a signal. Tell the class. So whenever I want your attention, I'm going to say the signal. Right, let's practice. Then you have to practice it, rehearse it. Let's get it right. Let's have a few goes. Everyone talk to your neighbour and give the signal, and then practice it. So once you've rehearsed the signal and the students know it, do it very explicitly as an activity at the beginning. Great, well done, guys. So now we know the signal. That's what we're going to do. And then obviously during the course of a lesson, you need to do it. So you need to give the signal. Now this is the key. The pause is often the bit where teachers make a mistake. Because if I say to you, 3, 2, 1, and listening. Michael, what did you get for number 2? Like Michael is still like processing the 3, 2, 1. He hasn't had time. But I see teachers do that quite a lot. They're so in a hurry to get on. They want to get on with things. We all do. So they do their raised hand. John. But hang on a minute. John's already talking. These guys over here haven't fully paid attention yet. So what you've done is you've reinforced the idea that, the lessons will continue even if I still haven't responded yet. So the pause is important. You need to give students time to clock that it's happening. And it's not because they're being feckless and naughty often. It's just they're engrossed in what they're doing. They're talking and they hear the signal, and it just does take a minute. You try it with adults. You can ask a group of adults to stop their conversation and turn and face to the presentation. It takes a few minutes. Well, at least a minute. So the pause is key. And during the pause, you're making sure you're making eye contact with everybody in the room. Yeah. And you're going, well done, guys. Great. Nice affirmative sort of. And then the insistence comes for anybody who still isn't with you. So this is key. We don't just hurry on with our teaching if we haven't got everyone to do the thing we've asked. So this making sure you're one of the teachers that definitely means what they say is key. Insist means, no, I'm still waiting. Brilliant. Thanks very much. We've got everybody at the front ready. Just a few more. Brilliant. Thanks very much. Excellent. And if it's too slow and you're annoyed about that, then make an issue of it. But nearly every single time you're going to need to pause and then do that insistence. Wait until everyone is with you. Good. Right, now we're ready to move on. And that trains students to thinking, you mean it. You're serious about your expectations, and the signal means I really must listen, even me, yes, me too. I'm included. I'm part of the lesson. So there you go. That's signal, pause, and the insistence is that eye contact. And it's a great way to get up to speed with behavior management. If you're doing that insistence from the beginning, and you've got the students' names in front of you so that you can call individuals when you know they're not paying attention early on. If you don't know their names yet at the start, it can be more difficult to do the insisting. So it's really useful actually to have a seating plan with the students' names on, and you can use their names to call them and say, Michael, let's have you listening. Thank you. And you look, is it Josephine? Yeah, great. Are we ready? Fantastic. And it helps you learn them, their names, almost by using them for this sort of reinforcement moment very early on. Okay, so that's my second strategy to really nail. Cold calling. Now, this is a strategy which I include in training all the time. It's the same idea pretty much as the one described by Doug Lemov in Teach Like a Champion. And it's, for me, a central teacher questioning technique, which everybody ought to be able to master. And there are a number of reasons why I think it's important. Essentially, it's the opposite of hands up and calling out. And it has many, many benefits if you get it right. It makes sure that every student feels that they're involved, that they're expected to contribute. It gives you much better feedback as the teacher about the level of understanding in a room if you're cold calling students rather than allowing them to volunteer answers or call out. And it avoids the problem which I identify a lot when I visit schools, which is that if you allow calling out or hands up as the main way of answering, there are students who very often don't answer any questions at all because they don't really expect to. They won't ever put their hand up because they just become someone who doesn't do that. And they don't call out. So if you take most of your answers from the people who call out or put their hands up, those other students don't get involved. And I see that regularly, that is what's happening. So you've got to think about your own lessons. Is that happening in my class? Is it possible for a student to sit in my lesson and not participate because I'm, distracted or, overexcited about the fact that students are participating and I focus on them? So cold calling is like reverse that. It says that I choose because I know you. I want to get to know you. I want to know what you think. I want to know what you all think. And I need a good sample of responses to tell me, am I ready to move on or not? And so I choose. So we establish the principle right from the off. No hands up, no calling out. When I ask a question, think, and then I'll call you. So this is how it goes. First thing is to get the habit of the question being for everybody. So ask the class the question means for everyone. So I ask the class a question a little into the air. So it might be, a maths question. What is the square root of 121? And that's the question. Now I want to know if someone knows it or can remember it, or it might be something you have to work out, like what's 17 times 22? So what's 17 times 22? Okay, think about that for a minute. How would you work it out? And I'm sort of probing. How would you work it out? How would you explain it to somebody else? Is there a simple method? Right. Thinking time has been given. It's been built into that because I've floated the question out and I've been allowing it to sort of hover in the room without calling out. Some students might know it quickly, but they're having to think, okay, how would I explain it to somebody else? Someone else is having time to just process. And then when I've had enough time for everyone to have had the chance to think about the answer, I then select someone to respond. And who do I ask? Well, I ask somebody who I feel maybe haven't asked recently, or I'm sort of filling in the gaps of who hasn't been involved for a while. I'm definitely involving the people who would otherwise opt out. I would say, no, come on, I'm involving you in. I may be asking somebody who is very eager because, they want to be involved. You're just trying to balance all these things. So you select someone to respond and you invite them in. So the cold calling isn't like, right, what's the answer? You're not trying to catch someone out like, gotcha. It's the absolute opposite of that. It's an invitation to be involved. And you're sort of saying, hey, I want to know what you think. So Jeremy, what do you think? You were thinking there. What do you get for 17 times 22? And how did you work it out? Let's have a listen. And then you're inviting him to participate. Oh, that's good. That's correct, actually. So is there another way you've done it? And you're involved in a dialogue. And you've had Jeremy's answer. So you respond to the answer. You don't just say correct, because correctness in itself is only so useful. But what we're interested in is method, because it's only one example of that type of question. And we don't want other students to think he just knows stuff by magic. There's a reason he knows it. And so great. So let's have your method. So you respond, you engage. And then, this is the really important bit, we're not just ready to move on now. Just because Jeremy knows the answer to that question doesn't mean anyone else does. And at this stage, I'm thinking, well, that's a good start, but I need to get better information. So I then select someone else. Susie, you heard Jeremy there. Did you get the same? What did you think? What did you have? Did you get that right? Okay, let's have a listen to you. And it might be the exact same question, or it might be a slightly different one. Say, okay, so he got that one right. What would this one be then? What would 17 times 33 be? Can you use the same pattern method that he used? And let's hear you. So you extend the question. Maybe you might ask exactly the same one. It depends on the material. But you get another student. And so we've got two different students here have responded, and you might ask for a third one. And that will tell you, okay, do we understand this method? Do I think the method I've been teaching you is being well understood and used or not? And if it's not, then, I think let's go through this again. And you might go back and reteach the whole thing, or you might just feel like, hey, great, let's try some, let's step forward now because we seem to be getting it. So sampling 3, 4, 5 students. Probably after that, you think, well, I've probably exhausted this because there's an energy in the room sort of aspect. One is never enough, though. So cold calling is a warm invitation to multiple students to participate. And because they've all had to think about all of the questions, they've all been thinking and checking their own answers against what's being discussed. So they're all involved. It isn't about slavishly going around the room, making sure literally every person responds one by one to every question. That's very time consuming and laborious and mechanistic. And it's different from the lolly sticks thing. Sometimes people talk about, random questioning as a good thing. And that's a different strategy. That's where you just might have a random name generator, or just, names out of a hat or whatever. That can be useful if you really find that you're worried about your bias and you feel you're always asking the same people. But the difference with cold calling is that the cold calling is you choosing, and it communicates to the student, I really want you to answer because I've chosen for you to be involved and I care what you think. Whereas the random method you can't really care what they think in the same way because you didn't really pick them to answer. It's a slightly different way of doing it. And it's more organic to cold call. So I would say, if you're starting off with a new class this term, embed cold calling from day one. Make it the absolute normal way. You always ask all the questions. You choose who answers. And the students don't call out. And if they do, you don't take their answers and you challenge them. No, we don't have calling out, and we don't have hands up. There's no point putting your hand up because I'm not taking hands up. I decide because that's how it's done. And then you can use hands up for other things like asking questions. If someone's got a question they want to ask you and they put their hand up, then that's what it's for. So great, that's interesting. What's your question? And it's a different thing. that's different. So cold calling is really, really good. It's a great way of you getting to know the class. And if you typically just take hands up and calling out, and you switch, I think you find you find out so much more about the students in your room by choosing, because you find out that students don't know the things that you thought they did. The people who volunteer are typically way more confident than the people who don't. And if you then do this thing of responding to answers, you probe into the schema, and we'll come to that a little bit more in a sec. Another favourite strategy for me is think, pair, share. There's lots of agendas in a classroom. One of them is involving everybody in thinking, and one of them is getting them to understand what they know. And part of that is sort of rehearsing your own knowledge. So if I ask you a question about something like, do you understand how inflation works? Why do we have inflation in our economy? Well, you might think, I kind of understand it, but well, let's have a go at explaining it. Now, how do I get everybody doing that? Well, they could be mentally thinking, do I understand inflation? But if they're in a pair and they turn to their partner and say, well, just rehearsing their knowledge, generating a response, they're all sort of airing their knowledge, exploring their schema for this concept of inflation. And then you're going to get lots of people engaged. And then you sample the room of responses, check against the correct answer that you were trying to explain earlier. And then you'll get lots of students learning. There's also rehearsing vocabulary. How do I get everybody just saying the word inflation if I've just taught it to them? Well, I get them all using the word inflation when they're discussing. Inflation means X, or interest rates. What's the link between interest rates and inflation? Well, try to explain the connection between those two terms in your pair. And so that's what's going on. Or it could be any number of terms at any level of teaching. How do I get everyone using the terms? By getting them in a pair to discuss them. There's lots of things pairs can be done for: rehearsing answers, checking each other's knowledge, quizzing each other, preparing to give an explanation. And it's safe. In a whole class situation, if someone's not sure, sometimes they're really inhibited and they think, oh God, I don't know anything. But in a pair, they can turn to the neighbour and say, yikes, I don't know this, do you know? And they can admit to their error. And then when you call them to respond, they're more likely to say, we really didn't understand this. And that's honest, and it helps you teach them better, because then you can respond. And my experience is really strongly this, that after a pair discussion, students are far more likely to admit their mistakes or their confusion than just by themselves. So that in itself is useful information. So how do we get this pair share going? Well, the think there is part of it, but let's just go into it. So first of all, it shouldn't be a faff. You need to do this multiple times in a lesson. So everyone should have their talk partner. So as part of an early establishment phase, who's your talk partner? Right, let's just get that. So we're going to do lots of pair share in the class. So does everyone have a talk partner that's automatic? And of course, you might mix that up later. And it shouldn't be. It should be clear. So if there's always if there's an odd number of kids, then you're going to have 3, and that's fine. So you have a 3, and the rest are in pairs as far as possible. Don't have 4s and stuff like that, because in a 4, unless you structure that deliberately as a specific group task, you just have 2 or 3 people talking, and there's always 1 or more just on the outside listening to the others, and they're not really involved. So pairs is the thing. It's not just any group you like. So then when you've got this established, you set the question. Okay, guys, in your pair, I want you to discuss this, and you give a precise thing and with a time frame, and that's so that everyone knows how to frame the discussion. So it could be, I want you to think of the 4 reasons we discussed last week for climate change. There were 4 main factors. Can you remember what they were? So see if you can rehearse that in your pair. List the 4 factors and see if you can put them in the order of importance as we discussed, without looking at your books. So that's the goal. And I'm going to give you a minute to do that. Go. Boom. So then in that minute, the students are then rehearsing each other's knowledge and checking the 4 things. It's very precise. It's very focused. They're not just having a chat about stuff they remember about global warming. It's focused, and they know they have a minute. So there's an energy to it. It could be longer. It could be, you've got 5 minutes. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to work out the opening line or the draft a paragraph. It could be a talk for writing thing. I want you to see if you can come up with an opening paragraph for this essay or something. And then it's a bit more of an expansive discussion, but it's still got a time limit and a focus. So that's important. A goal and a time frame. It helps you pitch the intensity within the discussion. So that thinking time is key while it's happening. So you have this time to pass so that students are engaged. And as that's going on, you start to circulate. I've seen teachers sort of waste this opportunity too often where they've got the pair discussion going, but they're sort of standing at the front, sort of just like watching it. And actually it's when you get in amongst, circulate, get in amongst the students, listen in, and you can hear the pair discussions going on. And part of that is making sure they're keeping to task, which is not unimportant. It is important, but it's also that you pick up on stuff which you can then refer to later, and you can also check, actually, guys, that's not quite what we were saying, so that you can hear errors, but also you can pick up on special examples to refer back to the class. So that's very powerful. And then time's up. Okay, 3, 2, 1, and then use the signal, pause, insist, everyone listening. Thank you. Right, and then you do the cold calling. So then we say, you guys are having a good discussion. What were you thinking then? What were your four? What did you come up with? And you cold call them then. So this is where this combination of strategies works together. We've got the think, pair, share. We've got the signal, pause, insist, and then the cold calling for you select. So these strategies don't just exist in isolation. You blend them together. And if you've rehearsed them all, they become a nice sort of repertoire suite of things, which happens well. And if you can get everybody talking and everybody listening whenever you want them to in a structured, productive way, it's really powerful, and it just makes everything else go. So that's how the pair works. How many pairs do you sample? Well, how many do you need? More than one. So that's great. So who else got it right? What I think is a mistake is when you've asked students to do, say, come up with 4 things, and you just take one from 4 groups. That doesn't honour the task. If you want them to come up with 4 things, ask them for all 4, because then you can compare it with another group's 4. If that you just get one at a time, then what happens, that sets the expectation that during paired discussion, if we're asked for 4 things, we don't really need 4. We could just say a couple. Oh, we only got 1. Okay. Be demanding. The expectations are, no, I've asked you for 4 ideas, so make sure there are 4. List them out, and that deepens the intensity. Increases the intensity of the thinking. It sets the expectations higher for the learning. All sorts of aspects. So make sure you get a full explanation from students if you've asked for a full explanation, not just sort of half-formed things or whatever. And model that in your discussion with the group, and then again another group to check, and so on. Last of all is this idea of checking for understanding. So it's one of the Barrett Rosenshine principles of instruction concepts, which is very important. And it's actually, you already heard me talk about it quite a few times in terms of behavior management, and also what you're doing when you're asking more than one student an answer. And in some ways, check for understanding is the right at the core of really good teaching. It's this understanding from you as a teacher that all of your students are thinking about ideas in different ways because they've got different prior knowledge and different ways of processing things. And I need a good sample of that in order to inform me about whether or not I'm ready to teach more, or to reinforce the things we've done, or to give more practice, or whatever I think I need to do. And it's this opposite of assuming understanding is there. You check for it. So what Rosenshine says in some of his work is the opposite, how not to check for understanding is to say something like, have you understood? Is everyone clear about the task? Is everyone clear? Does everyone know what to do next? Now, those are not very helpful questions, because the students can just say yes. And then, of course, it depends on whether they follow through, and then you find out they didn't really understand. But sometimes that's wasted loads of time because they never really understood. They just said they did, or they thought they understood, but they were wrong. So check for understanding is, what have you understood? What do you think the task is then? What do you think the meaning of this word is? What do you think the chapter means, what the author means when they've written this? What do you think it is? Tell me, what What do you understand the answer is? What do you understand the method is? What do you understand the meaning is? Tell me what you're thinking. Not tell me whether you've understood, tell me what you've understood. So it's very significant. And if you get into the habit of doing this as a teacher, it's just great. It just means that it becomes a normal thing you always do. I know a teacher who's had to change his habit on this, and he's got it written on a piece of paper on the window next, so he sees it all the time. It just says, "What have you understood?" as in big writing. So, because he was someone who would say previously, he was often saying, "Have you understood?" or "Is everyone okay?" That kind of thing. Any problems? Any questions? Now he's thinking, "No, stop doing that. What have you understood?" and sampling the room. So this is how you do it. You cold call, so you definitely choose who to ask, and then you say, "What have you understood?" And then you probe with a short dialogue. So make sure they've understood in detail, not just at a superficial level. So, okay, what did I ask you to do next? And what about after that? And is that all I asked you to do? Check. What else could there have been? So check for understanding isn't just a one hit response. It's a short dialogue to make sure everyone's clear. And then it's someone else. Okay, that's interesting. So I think you've understood that concept. Over here now. So Mo, what do you think? Let's hear from you. Did you understand what Shania was saying? What do you think Shania's point was? Let's hear what you think she was saying. Okay, great. What would you have said on your own? Okay, are they the same? Or whatever. So you involve students in listening to each other, which gives them an investment in this whole process when other people are talking. That it's not just about them and I can shut down while they're talking. I might be asked to check my understanding of what they've said, and it has an accountability element to it in terms of really increasing the engagement. So I have a little dialogue with Shania, then with Mo, then Alex. Let's see if let's just really nail this now. You've heard a few explanations. Let me just check them. What have you understood? Why do you think this phenomena happens? Let's hear you explain it. And then Alex hopefully gives you a really good answer at that point. But what's so interesting is that even students who sort of think they know, when they're actually asked to model their understanding, they can't find the language sometimes, or steps missing, or the conceptually there's a gap there where they actually don't know that whole thing. And I find this really interesting even as a training exercise with adults to talk through concepts in the curriculum. If we can't explain them to each other, we're maybe not quite ready to explain it to our classes, and rehearsing our knowledge and understanding is a useful thing to do. It's often in the differences where the learning happens. So good explanation there, but not the same. So why does that happen? Why can two explanations both be good but not be the same? Well, because does that word mean the same as that word? Is that just a different method to that, but both equally valid, and so on? This is where learning lies. It lies in these details, and then you can pick up on things. And this is the key bit. All of this is it's testing the students, sure. It's giving them a rehearsal time, definitely. It's giving them practice, yes. They're all checking their knowledge, but you are getting feedback. You are then thinking, right, this is the state of play at the moment, without some formal test or whatever, just in the dynamic, in the moment thing of the lesson. Am I ready to go on to my next set of questions that I had planned, or not? And you do need to be prepared for that to be no. No, they're not ready. Because if I go on now, I can already tell that they're not ready. So I need to have stuff I can reteach with, or go back to the same examples or whatever. Maybe you need to defer. That's often a good one. Like, it's okay, I've got a sense of their level of understanding, but because of reasons that, in the curriculum, I need to teach the next bit anyway. But I'm going to park this and we'll refer back to it. I'm going to come back in a week's time, which is often a really good strategy, because I've identified some gaps, but they just probably need a bit more time to consolidate, and I'll check in next time and see how we go. So that can happen. So you defer. So I'm going to go back right away, or I'm going to defer to another time, or just great, good knowledge and understanding. It's been secured, and then let's just plow on. Let's move forward. And you do that with confidence. So that's the decision you're sort of taking all the time, and knowing that that's the reason you're checking for understanding makes you do it more. It's not about quizzing every single student, which is really hard to do effectively. It's about getting enough information to make your choice. So this is where the hands up thing comes in. If you've got loads of kids calling out correct answers, even 2/3 of them, well, what about the other third? They need to know it too. And if you don't know if they know it, so you do need to be sampling into the silent corners, the students who mask their lack of knowledge and understanding. You need to be getting in there. Sometimes teachers say, what about the kids who are shy? And of course, that's an issue. But the best way to address that is to find a way for them to still contribute and get over their shyness. It's not like you just say, oh God, yeah, Joanna's a bit shy, so we basically leave her alone. Because what does that do? That just embeds the sort of habit that Joanna doesn't answer questions. You have to work with Joanna and talk to her and say, how do we get you, you listen to her and her pair discussion. That's a good way of doing it. And then volunteer her answers. Joanna had a great point. She said X and she realizes that her answers have value or whatever. You find a way for Joanna to be part of the class. You don't just cement the idea that, no, Joanna's a shy kid and I leave her alone. That can be, a self-fulfilling prophecy. So there we go. These are 5 strategies. I hope you found those useful. Those are just 5 things which I hope will kickstart your term. And a good start is a healthy start. And then you feel better, the students feel better. And, that's part of feeling positive on the front foot as a teacher. They're all part of the walkthroughs materials. There's more information there. There's a website link if you want to go and check them all out. And I really wish you a great start to the term. Thank you, Jamie, for inviting me to be involved. And I hope you found that useful. Thank you.